Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and today I've got a fantastic guest. Now, you probably know Mr. Carl Wells as the 50th Strawberry King. We're just a couple weeks off of this historic Strawberry Festival. As you know, we talked to the Queen about a month ago, and she dazzled us because she was an incredible woman. And I can tell you that she has a suitable king in Carl Wells. This is a man who is an entertaining storyteller, a wonderful family man, a successful businessman with a long career in forestry, and just one of the best liked people in Ponchatoula. He's not only our most recent Strawberry King, but he's also a former Strawberry Grand Marshal, and I think maybe the only living founder of the Strawberry Festival. I'll ask him more about that and get that story later. But with no further ado, I bring to you Mr. Carl Wells. King Carl, welcome to the show. How are you?
Doing great, Parker. I appreciate you inviting me to be on the show.
Well, thank you for being here with us. Why don't we begin with you just telling our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Well, I was born in Ponchatoula on the east side. My mother and father were strawberry farmers, and naturally I did my share of work in the strawberry business, and I graduated and went to Ponchatoula school system and graduated Ponchatoula High School in 1958, a long time ago. But I still live out on the property that our family owns. My two brothers and my oldest brother, he is deceased. The other two brothers are still out there on family property, east of Ponchatoula.
That is so cool. So this is property that your family grew up farming. So, as Strawberry King, we're talking about something that you've lived basically since you were a baby out there on the same property you live on now, right? That's really cool.
That's correct, Parker.
Well, you mentioned graduating from PHS in 1958. By my count, that puts you about 2 years ahead of my daddy. Is that right?
That's correct. Eddie and I were friends in high school, and I'm a little older than Eddie.
Yeah, my dad said so many good things about you over the years. I know he considers you a lifelong friend. And like the rest of the Layrisson clan, he just thinks the world of you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what it was like to grow up in Ponchatoula in the late 40s and early 50s and go to high school there into the late 50s? What was the town like back then, and what do you remember fondly from your childhood in Ponchatoula?
Well, naturally, we did our share of the work on the farm, and it was more than strawberries. It was after the strawberry season, it was pepper season and vegetables, and my dad would sell the vegetables to whatever market was available, and we did our share of work. And then being on the farm, you had cows, and you milked the cows to give you the milk that you needed. And so it was naturally a family function, and that was just part of our life growing up.
So all these people now that are talking about farm to table and going to farmers markets, you guys were ahead of the curve. Farm to table for you was a matter of feet, not miles, right?
Yeah, you're correct. That's exactly right.
Well, what was PHS like back in those days in the 50s? What do you remember about the high school experience? Because Ponchatoula is a one high school town. Most of us go through PHS, and all of us that do have fond memories of our days there. But I'm sure in 1958 it was much different than 1995 when I got out, or 2022 this year. So what do you remember about high school that you like to share?
Well, you knew every one of your classmates, and that was a reward that I reckon that we had back then, that you don't necessarily some of your classmates by being in class with them, but then
Right.
you were actually friends with them, and you did a lot of things that you shared with them because they were in the same kind of environment you were in, and so we shared a lot of parties and things together.
Well, speaking of friends, who were some of the friends you used to run with back then?
Well, now going back that old, it makes me kind of in the older age group, and I think about some of the people that were my friends are no longer with us. I know on the east side of Ponchatoula, I can think about uh, Levi Robertson and John Roy Robertson, and they grew up on the farm too, and
Right.
some other Robertsons, and then naturally John Dahmer. He was our class president, and then
Hmm.
some of the uh, some of the people that I knew and were my classmates are no longer with us. But I would say about, I'm just guessing now, about half of the class is deceased, and half of them that graduated in the '58 class are no longer with us.
Well, we're sure fortunate here in Ponchatoula that you are still with us, and John Dahmer, and that half that's still here, because you guys have so much to teach us and share with us and still give to the community. I know, with a dad who's roughly your age, just a few years behind, it's tough as you see some of your best friends pass on. But I will say your generation's doing a fine job of keeping their names alive. It's not the first time I've heard the name Levi Robertson here in recent memory. That's a name that comes up from time to time here in Ponchatoula, and y'all are doing a great job keeping their memories alive. So I thank you for that. When you think about those good old days at PHS and growing up on a farm in Ponchatoula, and you think about today, where thankfully you're still very much with it, very active in our community, so active, you're the Strawberry King. Um, what are some key differences that you see from the childhood you had all those years ago, and say the childhood that maybe my sons are having or your grandchildren are having now in modern day Ponchatoula?
Well, I just think uh, one thing that is amazing to me is that I can remember I lived about 4.5 miles out of Ponchatoula. And I could ride my bicycle on Highway 22 into Ponchatoula and wouldn't pass up 5 cars from the time
Wow.
I rode a bicycle from that far out into Ponchatoula. But now there's so many cars on the road that you have to be real patient to get into Ponchatoula and give yourself some time.
Right, right. Wow. That's the truth, man. You can't get on any side road in Ponchatoula now and see fewer than 5 cars. I'm sure that's a major difference. Well, let's talk about where you went after your childhood, because you grew up on a farm, milking cows, picking berries and other vegetables and fruits, and then thankfully you had the opportunity to go into a very successful career after your PHS days, including military service, education, and more. So tell us about that next chapter in your life after you graduated from Ponchatoula High School.
Well, naturally, I can think about the fun times we had. I enlisted in the military, in the army, and of all places I got sent to was Alaska.
Wow.
And I was in Alaska. I'll give you a trivia question. When it became a state, I went there as it was a territory, but I was there when it became a state. Could you
Oh,
remember that?
that's cool. That's the kind of thing I only read about in history books, because we already had 50 states when by the time I was born. But that's a really cool piece of trivia, Mr. Carl. That's neat to live through.
And it was a fun time to be there. I spent a year and a half in Alaska, and it was quite different than the Louisiana. With all the
Yeah,
heat and rain and
sure.
everything. There it was cold and snow,
Hmm.
but it was an enjoyable year and a half, and I got to meet a lot of
Yeah. Now,
friends.
correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't your mother a poche, Mr. Carl?
That's correct. She was a
Okay.
coach.
Well, that reminds me the connection of Poche and Alaska. My good friend Eric Poche, who I grew up with, that's the son of Mr. Albert, better known as Mr. Rat to most of us here in Ponchatoula. He lived in Alaska for a while doing grizzly bear guides. So there's some connection with Ponchatoula Poches and the wild of Alaska that brings you guys up there. But
Well,
that place is on my bucket list. I've never been, but I've heard friends, Sparky Wells, Will Richardson, Eric Poche, these guys that have been up there speak of its beauty. The pictures are amazing. I'd love to get there. Have you been able to go there in recent years, or have you been back since it's a state? Tell me about that. Have you been back to Alaska at all, Mr. Carl, or not since you live there?
well, no, I haven't been back, but I one day I might get enough energy to go up there.
Kelly Wells, if you're watching, I know you're a traveling man and you're about to go on a cruise. When you get done having fun in the sun, maybe you can bring your daddy back to Alaska and he can take you around.
That would be a good trip for everybody.
That would be a lot of fun with the two of you. I'm sure it'd be a trip. Mr. Carl, what I want to do right now is share a comment that's been shared by our friend Cherie Kinchin Wells here. Okay. Mr. Carl, one of the things we can do on our show, because we're a live show appearing on Facebook, is let people who are watching you live share their comments with us. So Cherie says here that you are an incredible man. You are so genuine, and you have tugged at her heart by bringing up Mr. Levi and Mr. John Roy Robertson. And you sure did hang out with a great group when you were young. And she says, thank you for your service to our country and all you've done to serve our community. And she's blessed to call you family. Cherie loves you. So Cherie, thank you for sharing that with all of our viewers. And you are right. You are blessed to be married into that wonderful family. And you were blessed to be born into a great family. I saw your dear brother Kyle this weekend at the spring fair at St. Joseph, and it's always a treasure to see him. So the Kinchin and Wells families, those are great families here in Ponchatoula. To any of our other viewers who are watching live, if you would like to leave a comment, feel free to do that, and I'll do my best to bring it up here on the screen and share it with Mr. Carl. Mr. Carl's looking at an itty bitty iPhone screen, so if he's got eagle eyes and can read that, he's younger than I am, at least the ocular way. But yeah. So Cherie, thanks for saying that. So Mr. Carl, we're talking about chapters in your life. You go into the military, you enlist in the Army. They send you off to Alaska, which couldn't be more different from Ponchatoula, Louisiana, going from picking strawberries in the heat of the deep South to this icy glacier-filled, territory that's not even a state. What'd you learn in the Army? What was it like, and where'd you go next?
Well, naturally, you develop a lot of relationship with your fellow friends in the military, and I reckon it was an opportunity for me to go to a part of the world I hadn't been, and do my duty as a soldier. And I don't know how they selected me to go to Alaska, but I kind of enjoyed that tour, and it was fun, and I'll always remember that.
Now, when you got out of the service, you returned home to Louisiana to enroll in college. Is that right?
That's correct.
Can you tell us about that? Where'd you go? What did you study? And what was it like?
Well, when I got home, I enrolled in Southeastern Louisiana College. It was a college when I graduated. Went to Southeastern. It was a college.
I love this interview because we're talking Alaska before it was a state, Southeastern before it was a university. This is a great historical lesson here.
And I majored in agriculture, and I got a degree in plant science, and which Southeastern doesn't even have an agriculture program anymore. But it was, I think about a lot of the professors I had, A lot of them has passed on. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
their family is still connected some way or another with the university. But it was a good period of time going to school. I made a lot of friends, and I still communicate and meet up with some of them sometimes, and we enjoy the relationship of being friends and where we met in college.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of friends, and this is not a college friend, but this is a dear friend that you and I both share. Emily Bouger Hatfield has left a comment here. And Emily says, Mr. Carl, that you are an amazing personality, amazing person with the best personality. She and her family adore you. And of course, this is the mother of Strawberry Queen 50, Avery Myers, who is your queen. And a friend of mine from school, her sister was my classmate. Her husband's a dear friend as well. Emily, thank you for tuning in. You're going to give you a little sneak peek here, Emily. I've got a photo here. You might recognize one of the men in there as your grandfather, Mr. Dennis Abear. He's on one end, and he's not the only handsome fella. Who down here on that end, there's another guy I want to ask you about, Mr. Carl. While we're on our history lesson here, when we get to the Strawberry Festival portion of the interview. But Emily, thank you for tuning in and for sharing this comment, because you're right. Mr. Carl is an amazing person, and he's got a great personality. And I'm really honored to be talking with him here today. Mr. Carl, you mentioned when you were at Southeastern, you studied agriculture. That's a curriculum that's no longer at that university. I think now you got to go to LSU to study agriculture and forestry, as you did. Plant sciences leads me into thinking of the most iconic plant in our area, which aside from the Ponchatoula strawberry would probably have to be the cypress tree, right? It's my understanding that you went into a career in forestry and lumber and timber, and particularly, learned a lot about cypress. Is that right?
Well, actually, the cypress. I worked for Louisiana Cypress Lumber Company when I got out.
Mm-hmm.
For a short period of time, I didn't have a job. Right after I graduated from college, Virgil Allen's father-in-law was the principal at Champ Cooper School. And Virgil encouraged me. He said, "Look, you don't have a job. Go out there," and he said, "and become a teacher." I said, "Virgil, I don't have a teacher's certificate." He said that they need teachers. So I went to Mr. Hillary, and he gave me a job. So I was a short-term teacher in junior high level.
Right.
But I left and got into the timber industry, and I worked for Louisiana Cypress Lumber Company. And actually, they had quit cutting cypress, but they cut cypress from there for about 25 years.
Yeah.
And they own the cypress land below Ponchatoula, have 13,000 acres, and
oh wow,
they went in that swamp and they hauled it out by. Can you imagine?
I can't imagine how hard that worked. Yeah, you're talking to a lazy lawyer with soft hands, so I cannot imagine how tough it was to pull those logs out of that swamp. The closest I'll ever get to that is watching Shelby Stanger do it on TV. But but it had to be rough. But before we get into that part of your career, I didn't know about this Champ Cooper teaching angle. You share that with my dad. He was also briefly a teacher. He did it in Maurepas, but it really brings to mind a friend we share in Billy Gildner. Now, Billy Gildner is your nephew, right? And
That's correct.
Billy's coach Gildner out there at Champ Cooper doing a heck of a job with their basketball team. And that's really neat. I had no idea Billy was kind of carrying on the family legacy out there, following in Uncle Carl's footsteps. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Billy's done a good job, and he's got a beautiful little redheaded daughter.
Oh yeah, Zoe. So such a beautiful girl. Folks, for those of you that are watching our show for a while here, you'll remember that we interviewed Dr. Crystal Gildner. This is her husband, Coach Billy Gildner. I've asked him to come on the show, and he says he's going to get around to it one of these days, but he's been real busy, I guess, recovering from a basketball season where he had a lot of success and came up just a few points shy of a Paris championship. So, Mr. Carl, getting back to the Louisiana Cypress Lumber Company part of this, I'm going to share with you something you share with me. This is a brochure, folks, from that company. And as you can see, it's filled with photographs and information about the beautiful red cypress and the pecky cypress that comes out of or came out of our swamps. Tell me what it was like, Mr. Carl, to, promote Louisiana agriculture and the products. I mean, because you talked about as a child, selling strawberries and peppers and veggies and stuff, and now you're going into the beautiful wood. What's that mean to you as a guy who's grown up in agriculture, educated in agriculture, and then made a career as a professional in agriculture? What was that like, promoting the products you see grow up right here in your backyard?
Well, naturally, it's something that I'll always appreciate having a part of my career in the forest industry. But prior to that, I was naturally grew up on a farm. But the cypress was a commodity, a product that was very difficult to harvest. They built the railroad into the swamp, and they used tupelo gum to lay down before they laid the track. And they had a group of people. They had the track laying team. They had the people that cut the cypress, and then they had the people that pull them out up to load them on the rail cars. They come out of the swamp and they would go in. Now the train that's located in downtown Ponchatoula never did go in the swamp.
Really?
It was too big. It was too heavy.
Wow. Okay. It is giant.
It is switching on the yard at the mill site. And,
oh, wow. Now, what about that big giant log that's next to it that's laying on the ground? Did that come out of our local swamps?
It did.
Okay. That's really neat. So as I understand it, your career in forestry spanned well over 40 years. Is that right?
That's correct.
What are some lessons you learned along the way? Like if for example, you knew a young man or woman or anybody who was interested in getting into that industry now, and you've seen a world of change from the days before Alaska was a saint or Southeastern was a university, but you still have been active in consulting up into recent years into present times. What are some lessons you might share with a young professional that might want to follow in your footsteps?
Well, I would recommend that kind of test the water a little bit to see what you really want to do. And
yes, sir.
Once you find that out, you pursue the training, the necessary part of the needs that you need to be able to pursue a job in the area that you want to be in. And that's what I did with the timber industry. Even though I didn't have a degree in forestry, I had enough ability to obtain this through training myself and with the help of some professional foresters, because I wasn't a professional forester, but after that many years working for 5 different companies, every company will always send you to classes and give you opportunities to better yourself in your career.
That's great advice, and it's a prime example of how if you're determined with a singular focus, you can get into an industry even if you don't have maybe the traditional background. It brings to mind to me some of the great old lawyers that became attorneys without going to law school, because they did studied under other attorneys, learned, took the bar on, and so it's kind of neat to hear you tell that story. You mentioned the words, I think, test the waters. Speaking of doing that, let's switch gears a little bit into perhaps a topic that's more interesting than forestry to some of our viewers, which is testing the waters and meeting your wonderful wife, Miss Sandra Dominguez Wells. It's my understanding that you guys have been married since the 60s. It's not long after you left PHS and got to college and the military and all. Tell us about meeting your wife and how y'all fell in love, and ultimately we'll get to your beautiful family y'all created together.
Well, I reckon I met Sandra we went to the same church, so I got to be friends, and then we dated, and then naturally as time went on, we ended up getting married, and
Is that the French Corner Baptist Church where you're still a member?
that's correct, out on the
Okay.
east side of Ponchatoula.
Yes, sir.
And Sandra she was the oldest of 5 girls, and she was the oldest one of the whole family. She was the oldest girl and the oldest child in that family. They had 5 girls and 2 boys in that family.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been married for forever.
I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you for your anniversary date or how many years. That's a different question for a different day. But I do know that you love your wife. Y'all have some wonderful kids and grandkids. And why don't we take a moment to talk about them? I mean, tell us about your children, what they're into. You know, I kind of joked earlier about your son, Kelly, who's a guy I've always looked up to and admired. He's one of the most successful and most fun guys to come out of Ponchatoula in my days. But tell us about, raising a family with Miss Sandra and what that was like.
Well, talking about the children, I have 2 boys. Kelly's the oldest one, and Kelly never did marry, but he's like girls, but he's never married. Now Kevin is the youngest one, and he lives in Florida. He has 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. And his oldest daughter is going to the University of South Florida, and his second daughter is fixing to enroll in the University of Florida in Gainesville, and Parker, the youngest child, he's played football for the high school, and where Kevin happens to be the coach, and
very cool.
And Kevin has a camp in Mississippi. He loves to hunt. So
what part of Mississippi?
Up in he goes to Arm, which is go to Brookhaven, and you get off the interstate, Brookhaven, go to Monticello, and then you travel about 20 miles out past Monticello, and they've got a camp up there. And
that sounds a lot like my brothers. I got 3 brothers, and 2 of them love hunting in the deep woods of Mississippi. Well, you mentioned sports, how Kevin's coaching and his son's playing ball. That's something you did, right? I mean, didn't you grow up? I mean, didn't your kids grow up playing baseball and whatnot here in Ponchatoula, and you coached the little league teams they were on? Am I right about that?
Well, I was not very big in high school, so I played basketball was the only sport that I actually participated in. I wasn't big enough to play football. And baseball was not a sport that was as big as it is today.
Right. The PHS didn't have a baseball team back then. Am I right?
That's correct.
Yeah, I remember my dad telling me that, and I was shocked the first time he told me that.
Well, now it's one of the major sports in the high school level.
Yeah. But I ask about that because I know you mentioned your son Kevin coaching, and then your other son Kelly, I think, was assistant athletic director at Southeastern. Am I right about that? So clearly a passion for sports there in your family, and I've got to be heading out to Pard later to watch my boys play. They're playing t-ball together. My 4- and 6-year-old on the same team, and spent the winter and early spring out there coaching basketball. Now I'm out there as a spectator watching the baseball, and I know once upon a time you were doing all of that, and it's kind of neat to see that next generation of it, come about. Because your face kind of lights up there as you talk about your grandchildren. Them being off in Florida, are you able to see them much? Do y'all go there? Do they come here? How's all that work?
Well, we visit quite often, and naturally with them being in school and Kevin teaching school, he teaches agriculture in the high school, and he coaches football, so we don't see them much. But they came to the Strawberry Festival and stayed with us a few days. And well, the oldest girl had to work, and so Kelly bought her an airline ticket, and she flew here and stayed a couple of days, and then flew back to Tampa, and I
I
think
bet they enjoyed being royalty, huh? That had to be a fun experience for them.
oh yeah, well I think that being involved with it, they wanted to see their grandfather to
Yeah.
participate in it, and it was an enjoyment to be involved with them because
Hmm.
it don't come around very often.
Yeah. Well, I remember well when I was a kid when my dad was a Strawberry King. It was a really big deal to us boys. We just thought that was so cool. And because you know how it is, you can be a big deal in the real world, but in your own house, it's sometimes hard to get the respect you deserve. Um, and I can tell you the Strawberry King thing rates with your family. So I'm sure your family dug it. Let's talk about the Strawberry Festival because you have as rich a history probably as anyone there's ever been when it comes to the Strawberry Festival. Not only as someone who was born into a family of strawberry farmers, as many of our board members and royalty have been over the years, but you've literally been Strawberry King most recently. Before that, you were Strawberry Grand Marshal, and I think you were one of the original Strawberry board members back when in its Berry Bonanza days. Is that right?
That's correct,
Can
Mark.
we go back because I kind of showed this picture earlier, and I'll show it to you again, Mr. Carl. This is you over here on this side, and I'll let you talk about who else is on here. We see Governor Edwards, State Rep Bear. Tell us what it was like in the early days to organize a strawberry festival. How did it all get started?
Well, really, if you go back to the number of people, there was three JCs,
Hmm.
three Chamber of Commerce people, and Ron Morgan. He was the chairman,
Okay.
and that was the made up of the committee. And I happened to be the only one still alive in that first group. The three JCs was Richard
Wow.
Stilley,
Hmm.
Robin Hudson, and Ronnie Drew, and the Chamber of Commerce was my brother Sonny
Hmm.
and and Doris Candy Williams and I can't think of the other one myself.
Hey, you've done better. I couldn't probably remember, my own class from 3 years ago on my Rotary board when I was president from a few years back. So you've done great there. And you've really named some kind of titans of Ponchatoula, folks that really cast a big wake and left a big mark. Those are some names that are still well known all these years later, even after they passed.
Well, one thing I want to mention now, and I don't want to leave this out. Avery Myers was the sweetest girl to be the queen.
Yeah.
I've been around. Now, the rest of the royalty was wonderful people too, but Avery was.
Wow.
She kind of kept me in line, so to speak.
And that's no small task, Mr. Carl, because
and her family was absolutely wonderful with me, and
Yeah.
all the other royalty was a great bunch of people. Miss Margaret, Miss Willie,
Yeah.
and I'll always remember this. I probably won't make it another 50 years, but I've enjoyed the 50th year.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. Y'all had such a special group, and it was such a fitting group for the 50th year. We had Avery on the show just a few weeks ago leading up to the festival. And you're right. She is an incredible woman, the perfect queen for this year and for our 50th celebration. And I'm glad to hear you mention her family because on both sides, we kind of joked earlier about her mama's side. Her mom was kind enough to comment here. She's a wonderful person. So's her dad. I saw her dad speaking of the ballpark. He was out there coaching against my kids' team the other night, even though he doesn't have a kid in the league anymore. But he and his wife Paula are sponsoring a team, and they're out there giving of their time and energy and money just to promote, good things in the community. They're just great people. And Miss Margaret's also been on the show. She's wonderful. Miss Willie's family, they just a class act. And of course, you were a perfect leader for that group as the king. What did you learn this? You've been through so many strawberry festivals, from the founding day with the original 7, where you're now the last of the Mohicans, to being the Grand Marshal before, to being to a million festivals in other capacities as board member, visitor, et cetera, whatever. What did you learn here in this 50th year about Ponchatoula, the festival, or anything related to it that maybe you didn't know before you were the king of the Strawberry Festival?
Well, 50 years ago, you never would have dreamed it would have been like it was 50 years later.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it developed into something that it's a family festival, and the board itself is a working group that I didn't have no say so, but I always attended the board. They wanted us to be there so we would kind of be informed of what's going on, and that was the best bunch of people. And Jeff Wright was a wonderful chairman, and
Great chairman, and that's what, the second or third time he's done that. That's such a big giving of his time and energy and efforts, and he's done it several times and does a great job every time.
Amen.
Yeah. Well, I want to share a few more comments with you, Mr. Carl, if you don't mind, because you got a lot of friends that are chiming in here. And I'm going to start with you, Queen. She says she loves you, Mr. Carl, and she's sending you hugs and kisses and strawberry loving. Queen Avery, so good to hear from you again. You're one of my favorite interviews ever. And please tell your dad he's a heck of a baseball coach. He was fist bumping my little kids, even though they were on the other team the other night. I was proud of Coach Jeffro, my old classmate. Speaking of schoolmates, now I know this says Celeste Layrisson, but this has got to be my dad commenting through his wife's account. Dad's not a Facebook guy or a high-tech guy, but he says, Carl and I have been friends since our Paunchy High days back in the 1950s, and you have a wonderful, positive personality. Dad, thanks for watching, or Dad and Mom, if y'all are doing that together. But I doubt you knew my mom in the 50s when she was a kid in Livonia, Louisiana. So I'm pretty sure that's my dad. We've got Kevin and Karen Rayford on here. Kevin and Karen say, Mr. Carl, that you're one of the most genuine guys in Ponchatoula, or in the parish, really, and that you truly know much about the history of Tangipahoa. And they're so glad to call you a close friend. Thanks for being our Strawberry Festival queen. Mandy Braywick, another former guest of the show. Hey, Mandy, thanks for tuning in. She says hello to us, and you're a great man, a nice man. And she also agrees with you, Mr. Carl, that Avery's the best. She says she's such an amazing young woman. And then finally, we do know your son, Kelly Wells, is watching. So he's not just planning for his cruise and all the fun he's going to have when he's doing that. But he says, you better not forget your daughter-in-law, Julie. So we talked a lot earlier about your 2 sons, your grandkids, your wife. Let's not forget Julie. It sounds like you got a great daughter-in-law. Is that the case, Mr. Carl?
Absolutely. She's the best.
Well, Kelly, thank you. You always have Dad's back. You kept him out of some hot water by reminding him there. Folks, another quick reminder here. If you're watching and you'd like to talk to Mr. Carl, if you're watching us live here, feel free to share a comment, and I'll do my best to bring it up here on the show. We're here with Carl Wells, who's talked about 80 years of living in Ponchatoula, 50 years in the Strawberry Festival. He was there the day it founded and one of the founding board members. He's the 50th king here this year. He's done so much in between. Let me ask you this, Mr. Carl. You've lived such a full life. You're still, thank God, healthy, active, very sharp-witted. What's a day in the life look like for you these days? I know you're slowing down some professionally, but you're not, heading to the recliner full time and retiring like some folks we know. What's your life like day to day? What are you into these days?
Well, I get the list every morning from my wife, and I take care of those chores, and then I cut grass. Now, one thing after we had the storm, we had a lot of trees that got blown down in the yard area. That we had a group from the Lutheran Church came and worked for several days, and they cut them up and stacked them in piles. And they didn't go out into the wooded area. They just did it in the yard and that. And that group of people did not charge a thing.
Oh,
Now
that's
we sent a donation to the church headquarters
hmm
because we felt like that was only the right thing to do, and we kind of do things around home.
yeah.
I cut grass and I stay active. I don't
You
have
share
any
that with my
job I
dad.
gotta
My
go
dad
to.
loves cutting grass. I guess it's tractor therapy, if you will, right? But whether he's
Right.
out at his farm in Laranja or here in Ponchatoula, he loves to be on a mower. That's a great way to spend a day. You and your old
I
buddy
agree
share
with
that
you.
in
That's
common. It sounds like you live a really full life. Let me ask you this. If you were speaking to young people today, I know I asked you the question, what you'd say to young professionals, but to people that want to succeed in life other ways, whether it be as a parent, as you have, or just a community leader, as your son Kelly, for example, has, or just any kind of way. What advice do you want to share with our viewers? Because I know you to be a wise man of 81 years. Your birthday's coming up here soon, so we're almost to 82, right? Um,
that's correct.
when you think about kids like your grandchildren who are either in school or shortly out of school, up to young adults like your kids and myself, I guess I can't call myself young anymore with all these grays, middle-aged, if you will. What advice do you have for these next generations that you wouldn't mind sharing with our viewers?
Well, I think that children and needs to prepare themselves for the next phase of their life. You know, after the high school days, if it's college, go and do a good job so you can get a decent job that you can provide for your future family, or
Hmm.
some people choose the military way, and there's nothing wrong with that. And
Right.
figure out what you want to do. Don't sit there and wait for somebody to give you something. It's got to be something that you do for yourself. And I know that parents encourage their children to get involved with something that's positive for themselves and for their family. And it only tells. I know my three grandchildren. They definitely are involved. In the oldest one, he goes to college, but she has a job, and
Uh-huh.
and she has to get permission from her job if she wants to take off to do something. She don't just do it on her own, and be responsible for the service that you was given to do for them.
Yeah, learning that kind of responsibility at a young age is so important, and it will carry you through life. I think back to the jobs I had in college, working for my dear late friend Mark Griggs, or my older brother at his law firm, or even before both of those, working at Hi Ho or Berrytown Produce in high school, learning work ethic like you mentioned at those student level of life carries you throughout the rest of your days, and it'll help you succeed whether you're 40 something, 80 something. We've all got responsibilities in this world, and you make a great point. What else? Is there anything else before because I promised I'd get you out of here on time so you could get back to your family. And as you know, I got to get to the ballpark here to watch these boys hit a T-ball. What else would be on your mind, your heart, or wherever? Anything else you want to share with our viewers before we go?
The only thing I want to thank all the since it's strawberry time, it was a wonderful ride for me to be selected as the king of the 50th anniversary of the Strawberry Festival. And the
Hmm.
royalty was a wonderful group of people that I'll always remember and be dear to my heart. And we got to do a lot of things that probably we wouldn't have done if I wouldn't have been the king. We went to Washington, we went to Baton Rouge, we went to
Right.
all the different uh, different functions that we participated in. And I may have not gone if I didn't have the responsibility of being the king. But I enjoyed it all, and I'm not sure that I'll be around for the next 50 years. But, it's
Well, we're
always
going to
a blessing.
enjoy whatever time you have left with us, and hopefully it's a long time. And be so grateful, Mr. Carl, to all you've done for us. And I want to thank you on behalf of our community for being our king, because I saw you go on TV. You know, I heard of you going around play. You mentioned Washington Mardi Gras. I used to be a member of that Mardi Gras crew. Many of my friends still go, and they call me back. You know, they text me, they email me, and tell me when they meet the Strawberry Queen, the Strawberry King, anybody from Ponchatoula. And you represented us so well wherever you went. And that's not only a testament to what a great man you are personally, but it's a benefit to our community that we should all be grateful for. So, King Carl Wells, the Strawberry King number 50, thank you for your time, for sharing yet once again with our community here today. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in. We'll hopefully see you back next week. Y'all have a great day. Take care.